The U.S. Senate just dropped a bomb on Florida home insurance companies, the Florida home insurance market, the Florida residents, and the United States taxpayer. Breaking news, the U.S. Senate Budget Committee announced an investigation into Citizens Insurance. And as a Florida homeowner, resident, and taxpayer, I can tell you it's about damn time. And it's a topic I've covered over the years in many videos. And evidently, finally, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee must have watched one, because they've opened an investigation into Florida Citizens Property Insurance Company and its ability to pay claims for climate-related disasters. Because if they can't, they're going back to the government's teat. They'll be begging for the federal government's help. And shout out to U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who obviously watched my previous videos on the home insurance crisis happening in Florida. But he and the Senate Budget Committee are demanding documents and information about plans by Florida's state-owned insurance company, which was supposed to be the insurer of last resort, to address increased underwriting losses from climate-related extreme weather events, like, for example, hurricanes and other natural disasters like tropical cyclones, rain, flooding, droughts, heat waves, wildfires, and the most obvious one, the increasing concern about sea levels rising. Because Citizens does not have the money to fund any of it. And everybody in Florida knows it. But evidently, the committee is just finding out. And now there is growing concern about the economy-wide harms. And I'm not talking about the Florida economy. I'm talking about the national economy. A Florida devastating event that the rest of the country has to bail out due to widespread uninsurability. And while DeSantis has done some things over the course of the last year to regulate the home insurance market and eliminate the epidemic fraud that existed in the space, which to his credit worked, but you don't exactly get a gold star or cookie if the insurer of last resort has no money to pay claims. But Citizens is not the insurer of last resort. In fact, Citizens' market share of multi-peril homeowner policies was approaching 20% in 2022. And it's more than doubled since 2020, which puts everybody at risk. This would be a bomb on the country economically. And the Budget Committee is increasingly concerned about Florida's uniquely large and growing exposure to climate-related property losses, Citizens' rapidly expanding market share, and state law allowing citizens to levy special assessments on all policyholders. In the event, and it really should say, when it happens, but if a Category 5 hurricane comes through a major Florida city, they will not have the ability to pay for the losses. Period. And this is not exactly breaking news. Back in March, DeSantis was on the record as stating that Citizens is not solvent, which is a big DeSantis word for broke. But I guess the Senate and the governors don't talk very often, because DeSantis is on the record as stating if we did have a major hurricane hit with a lot of citizen property holders, it would not have the money to pay out. Well, thankfully, finally, somebody at the Senate Budget Committee is paying attention, because if Citizens is unable to cover its losses, it is entirely possible that state leaders will definitely ask the federal government for a bailout. And if you've been watching for a while, you know how I feel about bailouts. But a bailout would put the federal government, which by the way is as broke as Citizens, but it would put the federal government, and by extension, the American taxpayer, at extreme risk. And the committee goes on to say it's increasingly concerned about the economic consequences of an eventual wide-scale decline in property values caused by increasing exposure to climate risk, and the attendant increase in insurance premiums and decrease in insurance availability. And the effect of this on households and on the federal government, revenues and spending, would be catastrophic. It would be a bombshell. It would be extremely damaging and long-lasting, as we saw during and after the 2008 financial crisis, according to the committee. And as per this breaking news, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' office did not immediately respond to questions about whether citizens would be allowed to respond to White House's call to cooperate with the investigation by producing the documents and other information which they demand. I suspect if you're running for president, you might want to take that phone call because this is the smoking gun, which will ensure you do not get elected. But the Budget Committee wants to see everything. They want long lists of data. They want to see modeling. They want to see analysis of citizens' potential exposure to various worst-case hurricane scenarios. And it also seeks estimates of citizens' market share over the next decade, analysis of its ability to pay claims resulting from various loss scenarios, and inventory of citizens' current assets, its total reinsurance coverage, maximum claims it could pay out without having to levy an assessment on Florida policyholders, and copies of communications between top state officials about citizens' future solvency and what it would do if Citizens was unable to cover its losses. And I can save the Senate a whole bunch of time. They can't do anything. And analysis schmanalysis. If a hurricane hits, government funds will be required. And not only are the policyholders going to get assessed, the entire country is going to pay for it because Citizens is broke. But don't take my word for it. Look at what Citizens just did. It just deleted, it just eliminated, it just canceled, it just cut Florida customers for the first time in years, thanks to an aggressive campaign to encourage private market carriers to assume tens of thousands of Citizens policies. 282,000 policies to be transferred away from the carrier in 2023, leaving it with just a mere 1.216 million policies, or 16% market share, and over $500 million in insured property value. And here's where it gets a little bit confusing, and it seems to be an inside job. Because Citizens spokesman responded to the letter by saying that Citizens is structured so that it will always be able to protect its policyholders and pay claims.
Well, isn't that special?
And while that sounds nice, it's not, because the reality is Citizens is required by Florida law to levy surcharges and assessments on its policyholders and nearly all Florida insurance customers until any deficit is eliminated, which is a fancy way of saying if they can't pay the bill, you will, and so will I. And the numbers don't lie. Citizens was insuring $586 billion in Florida property value at the end of October, but it only had $15.6 billion to pay out on claims, including reserves, reinsurance, and the Florida Hurricane Catastrophe Fund, which is egregious. And it's an inside job because the state of Florida would never let a private insurer run this way. Because it doesn't exactly take a rocket scientist to understand that $15 billion does not cover $586 billion in insured property. But because the company is owned by the state, it can play games. And it did. And despite their recent depopulation activity, the company is still adding 30 to 50,000 new policies per month, while charging rates as low as 50% below what the private market charges. And the truth is, we have been lucky for a long time in Florida. And yes, I know there have been some hurricanes, but we haven't been hit with a massive Category 5 in a major city in a long time. We've dodged many, many bullets over the years. And I know from experience when working with home buyers who are buying home insurance, they're always going to choose the alternative, which is 50% lower than other carriers. And Citizens is nowhere near in line with private carriers, which means almost every buyer is going to choose a Citizens policy because it's 50% cheaper than the other carriers, further increasing the risk to Florida homeowners, the Florida home insurance market, the US economy, and American taxpayers. The bomb keeps ticking and getting more nuclear and radioactive every time they sell a new policy. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that insuring property at a rate that doesn't let you meet your obligations is not a good strategy. And it's only going to take one big storm in a major metro like Tampa or Miami to wipe Citizens completely out. And if that didn't sound bad, wait, there's more. Citizens has the authority under state law to assess its own customers up to half the cost of their premiums to make up any shortfall in claims paying ability, which would create a massive hardship for most people. With inflation completely out of control and squeezing the consumer right now as we speak, the last thing that someone paying $3,000 a year for home insurance wants or can afford or will be able to survive is a $1,500 assessment out of the blue. Right now, most folks don't have a $500 emergency fund. A $1,500 assessment out of nowhere will devastate millions. And God forbid we get storms back to back year after year, because Citizens will be completely out of cash. And I'm fairly certain I'm going to get some phone calls from some of my insurance broker friends. And when they do call, what I'm going to tell them is Citizens should be the most expensive insurance in the state, not the least. But the US Senate just dropped a bombshell on Florida. And now I'm gonna drop a bombshell on all of the haters in the comment section. But because I'm not eloquent enough to say it the right way, I'm gonna have my good friend Elon Musk say it for me.
Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience. That's how I feel.
And unfortunately, that's exactly what Citizens will tell their policyholders when the policyholders need them the most.